Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. It's episode 96. It's September 6th, 2022. We got a lot to get into tonight, a lot of deep dive analysis. We're going to be here for the next 6 or 7 hours, providing you with context and historical analysis on the past week's news. A lot going on this past week. Also, last week, we had touched on a book that I had never heard of. It was called The Two Faces of George Bush. It was by Anthony Sutton. I was a little incredulous because I was like, I thought I had read all Sutton's books. And tonight we're going to be doing a deep dive on this book. Now, if you go out there, don't try to buy it. It goes for like $45,000 on Amazon. Tonight you're going to get to see inside that book deep dive. So save your money, sit tight. We also have stories like Project Veritas this past week did 2 hit pieces, exposés, examples of investigative journalism par excellence, uncovering the liberal agenda within the school system. And by liberal, I no longer mean free or liberating. I mean, it's kind of very oppressive and indoctrinating. So we'll get to look at that story tonight. There's a whole lot of news, governor's statement, attorney general statement, investigations going on just because of 1 or 2 James O'Keefe investigative journalist expose.
It is the video that has parents in Greenwich and around the nation talking tonight. Take a look. A school administrator caught on hidden camera saying he doesn't hire conservatives or Catholics. Now, this video secretly recorded by the conservative website Project Veritas. News 12 Connecticut's John Craven is at Coscob School in Greenwich, where that assistant principal is now on leave. John?
Well, Eric, classes begin here tomorrow. You can even see that the kids put out a welcome back sign. But their assistant principal, he will not be with them tomorrow after this video went viral.
Oh, so then what do you do with the Catholics if you find out someone is Catholic?
You're teaching them how to think. Mm-hmm. That's it. It doesn't matter what they think about it. If they think about it in a logical, progressive way, that becomes their own.
So you kind of like gear them to think in a more liberal way.
Mm-hmm. Believe me, the hopefully more progressive teachers are actually more savvy about delivering like a democratic message without really ever mentioning politics. It's subtle. They'll never say, oh, this is a liberal or a democratic way of doing this. You'll just make that the norm. And this is how we handle things. It's subtle.
And that's how you get away with it?
That's how you get away with it.
And how do you make sure the parents don't find out?
They can find out, so long as you never mention the politics.
And then later down the line, you're going to vote Democrat. And you will have done a great service to our country.
Jeremy Boland is the assistant principal at Coscob School. The edited video was posted last night by Project Veritas, a group specializing in hidden camera stings. What do we not see in the video?
Well, you've seen everything in context. He's said what he said. We stand by our reporting.
In a statement, Greenwich's superintendent said, "We intend to do a full investigation, and until that time, we will not make any public statements. We do not, however, support any opinions that promote discriminatory hiring practices based on race, religion, gender, or age in any way."
People talk about this diversity and inclusion all the time. I feel excluded as a result of what he did.
Project Veritas has its own controversies. The group recently paid for the rights to a diary stolen from President Biden's daughter, Ashley. The group has also faced lawsuits over its videos.
And I've won every case, including most recently against the New York Times for defamation.
Greenwich's first selectman is hiring an outside attorney to investigate.
We want it to be a totally independent investigation to see if this is pervasive and how far it goes up, how wide it is.
One former school board member says it's the right move.
It's not just a rogue administrator. If you're around Greenwich Public Schools, you know that this culture exists inside the system.
Hi. Is this seat taken? Yes. Okay, by whom? That person works for me. My name is James O'Keefe. I'm with Project Veritas, and you are on hidden camera speaking to our undercover journalist. That's the man that was meeting with you. And you're on tape. You work for Trinity School, right? You're the director of student activities. And you're on tape.
I work at a really fancy private school up on the Upper West Side. it's definitely a school where conservatives would not feel comfortable. I don't hide how I feel, but I can't pretend I'm promoting an agenda. And I clearly am. I can't promote all the stuff I'm doing. But when I started there, I hid my whole life. I felt like a double agent or something.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's the white boys who feel like very entitled to express their opposite opinions and just push back. Well, there's a huge contingent of them that are just like horrible.
You're recorded making all these statements, even though I clearly am promoting an agenda with all the stuff I'm doing. What agenda are you promoting?
I have no idea what this is.
Well, it's an undercover investigation by Project Veritas.
Also, you might have seen former Vice President Biden, in his speech with the red background. I thought maybe the cameras were messing with us, but it turns out those lights were white at the beginning of the presentation. As he walks up, they turn red. So it was an on purpose type of message to America. We're going to dig into that. It turns out he wants to be a wartime president. He might be a civil wartime president. Stay tuned and see.
I speak to you tonight from sacred ground in America, Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
One thing I do want to point out before we get back to his riveting coughing, you can see him better before they turn the demonic lighting features on, but you'll see this is a Marine and this is a Marine. Now, from what I understand, when presidents give normal speeches, they don't have the military behind them. But when they're giving them a wartime speech about the enemy, they'll have military soldiers behind them to symbolize, here's the force we will use against our enemy. So it's very unusual that the president would have military presence behind him, symbolizing, here's the force we can and will use. Because you have to say, he's not talking about Russia, he's not talking about China. So who's the enemy? The fact that he spends 95% of the speech talking about Trump and Trump's supporters. Only 75 million people voted for Trump in the last election, maybe more. So is that what the symbolic representation, the message is supposed to be here? I don't know, but if it is, there couldn't be much more tyrannical. Speaking of tyrannical, Biden, who loves to call Trump supporters fascists, loves to call anybody who's not on his tyrannical team fascist. Take a look at the set. Cool, red, black, creepy. Then you take a look at the Antifa logo. It's like, cool. This speech is sponsored by Antifa. Good for the change up. At least it's not sponsored by Pfizer. Antifa, ladies and gentlemen. Also can't help but point out, if you've seen the movie V for Vendetta, you realize it's one of those prophetic movies, much like George Orwell's 1984. And you look at here, the Chancellor, who's basically the tyrant villain of the movie, trying to control everybody through authoritarian ways. Here he is at his podium. Look familiar? Oh, no. Guys, quit making this so obvious. Just soft colors. Nice, light, let people feel good.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
There he goes right into it. Bro, you've been in office for 2 years. You and CNN without Trump, you're like the Joker without Batman. So a speech about unity, and now he has to lean in hard against Trump. How scared are these people of Donald Trump? He's someone who they can't control. The biggest threat to their whole agenda is someone who they can't control becoming president again. And by the way, like time for the gaslighting update, saying Donald Trump's supporters are the biggest threat to the Republic. Cool, Banana Republic Joe. You just use the FBI to raid President Trump. You've had this witch hunt January 6th trial. You had 4 years of the Russia collusion hoax. You've obliterated the First Amendment. Your White House tells Facebook what to censor. Not to mention, It was recently announced Biden has partnered with TikTok, which is run by the Chinese Communist Party, to uphold the election narratives and protect online users on TikTok from false midterm election narratives. What a great idea to uphold our democracy. Yeah, the only thing we can do to do that is to enlist the help of democracy-destroying communists to censor democratic free speech of Americans so that we can influence a democratic election.
Also, 1971 was a year where a lot of things happened. The United States went off the gold standard. A lot of havoc has, precipitated on America since then. We're going to look into the World Economic Forum's role in the 1971. You might go to WTFhappened-in-1971.com for more information. Also, there's the news of the Ukraine-Russia war that's been going on since February. Still going on today, unfortunately. And it seems that there was a peace deal being brokered in April, but Boris Johnson of the UK went over and squashed it. So why are they trying to keep the war going artificially? What role does the UK have in the affairs of Russia, Ukraine, or even NATO for that matter?
Buried inside of a new foreign affairs article is an absolutely stunning revelation. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. So those of you who might not be familiar, Fiona Hill is a former Russia staffer on the National Security Council, reveals exclusively in a new piece that Russia and Ukraine agreed to a tentative settlement in April that would have halted the war. But as Branko Marcetti points out, what ends up happening instead is that the UK Prime Minister, you guys will recall, Boris Johnson, flew over to Kyiv to instantly say, this is off the table. So here's what the direct quote. According to multiple Russian former senior U.S. officials we spoke with, in April 2022, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators appears to have tentatively agreed on the outlines of a negotiated interim settlement. Russia would withdraw to its position on February 23 when it controlled part of the Donbass and all of Crimea, and in exchange, Ukraine would promise not to seek NATO membership and instead receive security guarantees from a number of countries. Remember, those very, very, very early days of the war, we thought that that was a very distinct possibility. They were sitting down in Istanbul. They were sitting down also, in some of the contested regions, even during the actual invasion and push on Kyiv. Then it all falls apart. Billions of dollars of U.S. weapons and, some billions, not as many billions, from the UK, and then a paltry, tiny little sums start to flow in from France and everybody else. But the Anglo countries, Britain and the U.S., make it clear, we don't want you to sign a deal. Right. Zelensky sees that his real money train and by political necessity, the Ukrainian population wanted to fight. And then the foreign countries are like, no, we don't want you to give in at all. We want to keep the war going, or we want to stand up. Our own populations are now, aghast or whatever. Nobody can just settle this thing. And here we are. And to be frank, as where the battle line stands right now, this is basically exactly what's happened, except now a hell of a lot of people had to die for the Donbass region. Yeah. And now Donbass is gone. And look, we'll see if that southern offensive by the Ukrainians amounts to anything. Personally, I have my doubts.
This is, it really is a bombshell. And you lay out an important piece too, which, yes, we know it was UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson who made the trip specifically. This was according to reports in the Kyiv press and the Ukrainian press, specifically to say, we do not want you to settle. We are not ready for this war to end. But we know that the US and the UK have been in close alignment on our policy towards Ukraine. France and Germany were taking more of an approach of let's have talks, let's have diplomacy, especially Macron was on the phone with Putin all the time, trying to keep them in dialogue and keep them in conversation. At this point, also remember what happened is Russia was sort of bogged down. Things hadn't gone well for them. All the analysts were sort of wrong about how quickly this was going to all occur. The Ukrainians were doing much better than expected. So this was a key moment when if there was going to be a deal, this was it. And now you have Zelensky much more consistent in the press with we're going to, achieve our maximum. So we're going to take back Crimea. We're going to take back every square inch of territory. At the time, there were sort of mixed messages coming out, both from Kyiv and also from the Russian side. So This is an astounding failure. It's an astounding loss. It is incredibly cruel to the Ukrainian people to have, scuttled this deal and forced them to continue this war, which has been horrific for them. Now you have Europeans who are, we were just looking, they're facing a dire situation in terms of gas price, energy prices going into this winter, chaos around the globe. In my view, scuttling this deal is a world historic error and disaster from a human perspective. Yeah. So really key detail here. And also great commentary and, really noteworthy that this gets mentioned like not at all, like barely noticed in the mainstream press.
This is one of those things, I'm going to read about that in a history book in 20 years.
Yes.
We'll finally get all the details, and it'll be kind of like reading about the telegrams in World War I, which you don't get to read them until like 25 years later.
We'll get into that later tonight. We have special guests coming up later, author, researcher, historian Matthew Ehret.
And that was one of the early, I think, positive intuitions I had when I was just trying to figure things out early on, when we all go through the same sort of traumatic process. Was that at least when I would hear somebody who seemed to have some wisdom, who had been through the fire and came out of it with real knowledge, I made, whether it was Mike Rupert or anybody, I would listen to a lecture and they said that they read something. I would take note and I would try to find that book to try to reproduce in my mind what their minds went through to come to real knowledge. And it's not esoteric or mystical or difficult. It's just, it takes a little bit of patience. It means switching off a little bit and just taking the time to spend a couple of hours over a few consecutive days of reading and taking notes of your thoughts while you're reading. So you're both, it's more of an engaging active process and you're not just trying to consume. But that's really it. And you'll find when you walk away, even though it's an enjoyable, solemn process with you and yourself and your mind and the person who wrote the book, that's all it is. You walk away with a deeper quality of knowledge, and then the roots are just deeper, right? So you can use that in a way that you couldn't if you were just getting blips of trivia on social media, which turns into noise very easily. And you walk away, and I walk away. From sometimes, I think we all go through just our scrolling on Telegram or whatever social media people are using. And I feel it, where my mind is just like a buzz with just information overload. And I'm like, okay, I just spent 3 hours scrolling, getting blips of little interesting videos and little mini articles. And I don't think I can talk about anything I just read. That's not useful.
Yeah. Like, what are we getting as return on our investment, or are we spending time in a way that it's a liability and it doesn't give us anything useful for the future? Like you said, trivial, things that like little nuggets of knowledge. Like they used to have that game Trivial Pursuit back in the 80s. And it's about a whole bunch of incoherent, chaotic knowledge. That's like, this is a knowledge nugget that is useless in adult life to meet
Jeopardy
your responsibilities.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't see any billionaires going on Jeopardy. Right. So there's a different mind to make money than it does to recall stuff out of the phone book.
And to your point, Matt, the active versus passive process, when we're engaging with these mediums, these televised mediums, it creates this whole different dynamic. I know Marcia McLuhan talked about this. The medium is the message, and how these artificial apparatuses sort of condition the way in which we receive the information. There's something fundamentally different about reading a book that is much more active. You're in a way like talking to yourself in your head, working out complex ideas, trying to, and it's a test of both one's mental energy, acuity, but also there's a stimulation that comes with it that is, to Rich's point about dopamine, much more satisfying over a longer period of time. And that's something runs counter factual to what we experience in our culture today, where everything is quick cuts, quick edits, flashy, news items, flashy colors, whatever. And that's sort of creates this cognitive dissonance, this disconnection in the mind. And so getting back into to me, it's like a meditation. Getting back into the idea of reading is really going to help one develop quite literally their mental muscle, and also develop their rational processes. Because all of a sudden you may not agree with everything you read, and you may stop and think for a second, instead of just you heard someone say something and then you're on to the next clip. You heard now someone else is talking about it, and these quick cuts, these hot takes, and all that stuff that we get through.
Well, you can get wrapped up too when you do that. So like as part of surveying information, it's like, okay, I don't understand this, or I disagree with this, or what have you. That can snag you and stop you from consuming the whole article. And what I usually do is like, well, Why do I disagree with it? And if I can articulate readily, okay, then I'll keep reading. Or does it matter that I disagree with this? Right? He thinks orange is the best color. I think blue is the best color. Do I have to stop reading the article? So I'm going to just hold that off to the side while I consume the rest of the article. And then when it comes to the conclusion I'm supposed to take away from that, I'm going to ask, does it matter which color? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to go with the conclusion that made sense in reality and reflects truth. To kick it off, as always, let's go to Luke Radowski of wearechange.org and bestpoliticaltshirts.com or thebestpoliticalshirts.com for this week's initiatory news story.
Smile. Smile.
Oh, wow. How nice of them. San Francisco residents are so welcoming, they throw treats into your window when it's open. And they say it's a declining society.
What makes Autonomy uniquely empowering? Autonomy is a self-help course unlike any other. Over the course of our 12-week program, you'll experience weekly live lectures from Richard Grove, specifically designed to equip you with the skills you need to set yourself free. Free from the learned helplessness taught in our schools, free from the dependence on a corrupt system that serves only to uphold the rich, free from the structure of your 9-to-5 if that's your prerogative. Plus, you'll enter into a community of like-minded individuals who are pursuing the same freedom you are, and who'll support you and learn alongside you every step of the way. A lifetime of community and the tools to live however you want. We can't wait to meet you. Learn more at getautonomy.info.